Thanks for tuning in to another one of our videos sharing different people's LSAT stories. I'm really excited that we have Angelica here with us today. She's been a delight to work with, and she's been on her LSAT journey for a little while now, as she shakes her head, but she just completed her LSAT Flex in November, and so I thought it'd be a good time to bring her on as if this is a show. I'm going to pretend that this is a show. Bring her onto my show and ask her how she better prepared for this LSAT. So without waiting any longer, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Angelica. Thanks for interviewing me, I guess you could say.
This is when I'm going to bring in all the lights and everything. And when I do all my video editing, it's going to be like, and in comes Angelica.
I'm Angelica. I'm from Chicago, but I'm currently an undergrad. I go to school in St. Louis, Missouri. So I'm a couple hours away from home. I'm currently in my last semester of undergrad, so I graduate in December. I am a double major in political science and criminal justice with a minor in psych. And I came to school here because of bowling. I bowl competitively, and it is a thing in college. We do compete, you get scholarship, and you practice just like any other sport. So yeah, that's why I came here. I come to Lindenwood University, and I bowl.
How did you get into bowling? I feel like that's not something that's common.
Yeah, no, not at all. It's either you kind of grew up in a bowling family where your parents bowled, or in my case, my mom, I got to high school and she was like, okay, like let's like instead of just doing clubs, like maybe find something else that could help you, like maybe a sport. And with the kind of health I have, I'm asthmatic, so I can't really do those like cardio based sports. So we looked up like the different kinds of sports and activities that were offered at my school, and bowling was one of them. So I was like, okay, that sounds kind of fun, like I can do that.
So you and your mom was just like, hey, Angelica, you have to get involved somehow at school.
Right,
Find
yeah.
some type of hobby. And then she's like, okay, well, sport, like cardio sports are out. So let's look up our options.
Right. Yeah. So that limited. And she didn't want me just to do like programs or anything. She wanted like academic programs. She wanted something. She was like, like help with college apps or whatever. So I was like, okay,
Something
fine.
diverse. Like she wanted something like something unique or different, or a different type of challenge.
Yeah, right.
My dad made my brothers and I all take a fine arts in high school. Like every year we had to take choir, band, or be in a play, just because he wanted us to be used to. We were all big into sports, and he wanted us to be used to doing things that we weren't comfortable with, or even not being one of the best at, like just being a supporter, because he thought it would be good for us to have that experience later in life. And I'm so thankful for it now, because I have like different appreciations for things.
Right. And you can talk about that too.
Okay, so you're on a scholarship for bowling at your university?
Yes, I am. I also fall like in love with bowling because like the program in Illinois was very well known and was constantly ranking in like the top 5 for placing at state. And the coach was actually a retired professional, and he was like, hey, like, if you want to take this seriously, like you have a shot of if once you put in the work and become better, you have a shot of going to college with scholarship. And being raised by a single mother who eventually married, but still finances weren't great at home, I decided, like if this is one way to help pay for college, then yeah, I want to do it.
That's amazing. And I bet your mom's so proud of you.
Yeah.
Like this little hobby turned into your funding for undergrad.
Right, exactly. So yeah, that's kind of like my funny story of how I got into bowling, because usually it's like, oh, my dad bowled, or oh, my mom bowled, but no.
You're like, no, I just looked up on the internet and saw what hobbies can I join.
Literally, and I was just in it for the money.
So have you had any major accomplishments in bowling, or are you?
Yes. So in bowling in high school, my freshman year, we won state. I didn't actually compete on the team, on the varsity team, but I went as like an extra. But then my sophomore, junior, and senior year, I was on varsity all 3 years, and we placed like in the top 5 every year I was on the team and we went to state. So we had a lot of recruiters looking at our state. We were constantly ranked like in the top 2 in the state. And I eventually got promoted to team captain my senior year.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was pretty good. I placed individually as long with teammates at tournaments. as well as, coming to college and bowling. My freshman year, we won nationals. Yeah, so that
You're a
was,
state champ and a national champ.
yeah. So that was pretty cool. It's a nice experience that I got to
Apparently,
get.
that's a T2 soft for law school. Being an NCAA champion or
Mhm.
competing at a high level or an athlete like on varsity and contributing to the team is a T2 soft. FYI.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah, I think I came to the conclusion that I'm going to do my personal statement on bowling.
I think that's so interesting because it's a different perspective.
Right,
Um,
right.
so you're bowling at your university, you're studying poli-sci. Have you always wanted to be an attorney, or when did you kind of decide this was the route that you wanted to go?
So when I was younger, I was convinced I wanted to be a fashion designer. I went 180. And then I want to say once I started in middle school, I wanted to pursue law. That's like when it hit me that like, hey, like I want to do law, like law school's for me. Just because growing up, I was very exposed. Like my mom is like a crime junkie, so she would always watch like, those crime shows, the court shows. And I know it's nothing like in real life, but I was always like in that aspect of viewing things in that perspective. And I took interest into it. And I would like watch movies or TV shows or whatever. And I would talk to like attorneys in the area that
Mhm.
my put me in contact with, or professors as well. So I started to get more of an understanding, as well as when I was younger. Um, my dad wasn't in the picture, but there was always some type of like, I don't want to say custody battle, but a custody battle where there was lawyers involved. My mom would have to get a lawyer or go to court on behalf of me, because there were challenges thrown in there. So that
Mhm.
was like I was raised around, or was like
It
impactful in
was
my.
your norm.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So that's kind of like.
I don't think, I'm guessing, well, maybe that didn't actually take place in a courtroom. Maybe it did, but if it did, like most, however old you were at that age, most children have never actually been to a courtroom.
Right, yeah, no, and there was like two instances where it was in court. It was just like only like a few minutes, like maybe like 20 minutes, but it
But
was like
regardless, that's not the norm for,
a child, yeah,
yeah.
experience. So I think also that played a role in it as well, just being introduced to it at such a young age, and like you said, being a norm.
So then when did you decide to start studying for the LSAT?
I started in March. I started panicking.
I started preparing by panicking. Okay.
It's like I have a professor here who I'm pretty close with, who is actually he's an assistant professor, as well as he's currently practicing. He's an attorney.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so he knew I wanted to pursue law, and he started talking to me because he was like, hey, like, do you have any idea, like, how does this work, where do you want to go? I was like, no, I don't know anything really much. I knew of the LSAT, I just didn't know too much about it. So then he was like, I started joining Facebook groups and stuff like that, and people were talking about the LSAT, and I was like, oh crap, like, am I behind? So in April, I started like buckling down and actually took my diagnostic exam.
What was your diagnostic?
It was a 150, but then I took an exam a month later after like studying, and I dipped to like a 147. So yeah,
Well, your first one, did you take it timed or untimed?
it was timed,
So both
but
were timed, but you still dipped a month later, which isn't uncommon when you're scoring in that range. But
right. Yeah. And I think
how
that
discouraging was that?
it was very discouraging, I want to say, because it was like, okay, like I've been studying for a month, I've been studying basics. So I would assume that, like, if I didn't know anything going into the exam, learning what I did, I should have at least a point gone up. But it was, but I had to realize that, like, I've only been at it at a month. Like, I knew that I didn't know anything going into the exam, and it was kind of naive to think I would make a dramatic increase with just 1 month of studying. So yeah, it was a hard pill to swallow, but it was also like, okay, like you can't be comfortable. You have to actually keep at it and continue if you want to get better.
So if it wasn't for that professor, do you think that you would have started studying for the LSAT when you did?
Um, no, I probably would have waited till like summertime to study.
Would you have even known really that you needed to be studying? I guess is the better question.
Um, I probably did, but not at the pace or at as intense as I did.
Like I think that sometimes I am a first generation, well, I will be a first generation law student. So similarly, when I started my journey, I had no idea. I mean, I thought it was just a test you sign up for and you go take. You don't really study for it. It's kind of like the ACT. You might take some practice tests beforehand, but what you can get is what you get. You can't really improve. Where this test is nothing like this, and it's completely blown my mind.
Right. Yeah, that was kind of the assumption I had as well. But like with the ACT, I did study a bit. So I knew like maybe just ordering a textbook, I would be able to just like practice those strategies and then just
Mhm.
take it and whatever it is what it is, the score.
So that leads me into a different question. So I'm a first generation law, like will be a first generation law student, which I think has some disadvantages, but you're also a URM. What is a URM for those that might not be familiar with the
So a
acronym?
is an underrepresented minority. It's typically someone of a specific race or ethnicity that
Mhm.
makes them stick out from the population of law students. So I know earlier Google said a URM specifically was a percentage of students in law school that is below the national average or the national rate of people of that specific minority or group.
Right.
So for me, like I believe it was discovered that 16% of the population in America is Latino and only like 12% are in law school. So that's a URM in the sense that there's so many more of us in the world or in the nation, but lower amounts of us are pursuing a career in law school.
And that's law schools in general. So like let's say there's 11 to 12% Hispanic or Lat people from Latinas. Is that correct?
Yes.
Not the correct term to say. Thank you. They are attending law school, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are equally distributed among the level of law school either.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh, 12% of the top 14 schools are Latinas.
Yeah.
It might be, oh, these schools that are at the bottom and have a higher majority. So there can even though 12 to 16% maybe doesn't sound like that much, it can significantly matter whenever it comes to getting jobs and such. I would imagine so.
Yeah, for sure. I know like in higher ranking schools it might be lower, like as to 5%.
So why do URMs matter? Oftentimes, if you see on the Reddit boards or the Facebook posts, people will ask, well, that's URM, or don't give us false hope, that's URM numbers. Or I'm sure that maybe someone has said something to you that maybe isn't the kindest way to talk about it. And so why can you explain for those that don't understand why URM boost exist, why do they exist and why do we need them?
Okay, so yeah, I definitely have had a personal conflict as well with that. Like playing the URM card is what I refer to. People will call the
Is that a
URM
guilt that you're describing? Like you feel
right.
like personal guilt? Okay.
Feel of a sense like, hey, I'm a URM. I'm appealing to schools because of that, because there aren't as many of me represented in their program, so they're going to want me to um, increase the diversity in the program. But I had to accept that as yes, it is a positive thing I bring to the table, and it's not the only thing I bring to the table.
Absolutely. What is your GPA?
3.96.
Yeah, you bring more to the table than your URM status.
Yeah, so like obviously people are so quick to point out the obvious. I'm Latin. My color's darker. Not,
Yes.
it's obvious to see that. Like that's the first thing you see of me when you are in contact with me. But again, it's not the only thing I bring.
Right.
It's the most obvious and the first thing somebody can pick up. That's all I view URM as. That's
Right.
all.
And why do we need more URM students in law school?
I think we need more URM students, and why we bring value is because we have different difficulties we face in life. Some of us come with families that are immigrants and deal with different life challenges where we grew up, and just different perspective that we bring to the table versus other students from different backgrounds bring. We bring the Hispanic viewpoint of speaking two different languages. We can reach a greater audience of other people that might only know one language, or other people who speak a different type of language as well. We just bring more of an audience to people we can reach out to, which I think is a key factor with us.
Oh, absolutely. Like if there was a child that spoke Spanish or comes from a Latin family and we're both attorneys, who's going to resonate with that child most likely more quickly, you or me? And
Yeah,
I hope that my smile and kindness
yeah,
work. But
right.
at the end of the day, if I don't speak their language, that
Mhm.
can be really scary. I imagine like you, when you were in a courtroom, like if you could have a Spanish speaking attorney, how much that would mean to a young, not, I mean, more than just a young child, but definitely.
Yeah, it definitely just helps with the language barrier and, familiarity. Just knowing that we belong to
A similar
possibly,
community.
yeah, a community. So it's like with your family, like you're more comfortable staying with a family member if you're visiting them or something versus in a stranger's home.
Absolutely, especially if people feel like they already don't fit in.
Right. So
I've talked to other students that are URMs as well, and they say, if I already go into class and feel like I'm the oddball out, I don't need another reason to feel like I'm an oddball out. Like I deserve to be in there as well, and I deserve to be in the conversation.
right,
It's a
correct.
constant insecurity for them in a different way.
Right. Yeah, that's something I felt like once I hit middle school and high school when I was placed in advanced placement, I automatically realized like I'm the only Latina in the classroom. And I'm like, okay, this sucks. But it's also like I'm also here because I proved academic wise that I belong here.
Right. And so, how much pressure do you feel to represent your community?
I don't I feel pressure in a sense that there's not many of us.
Hmm.
So I didn't have necessarily an example of me when I was younger.
Yeah.
I felt like it would have been easier in the process of having like a mentor of like similar background to express and show like, hey, like this is the process, this is how law school apps work, this is what you have to do. I felt like that would have been very helpful as well as just having an example like, hey, somebody from a similar background did it. So can I.
Like
Yeah.
it's actually possible. Like there's
Yeah.
hope. There's hope at the end of the tunnel. It's not yes. One thing I didn't think about when someone was telling me like why the LSAT is more difficult for especially people of color or different ethnicities is because one, the topics that are talked about on the LSAT are not as you're not as familiar with them. Like you don't grow up reading that type of nature. Or two, if there's a language barrier, even they said like going back to elementary school, like when you were doing homework, if your parents were not fluent with English, they weren't really able to help you with your homework, which that might not be your situation, but that's something I didn't even think about is like, even when your parents read to you, they read to you, in your case, it might be Spanish, or for a different student, it might be a different language. And I never even considered how that could be a barrier throughout school as well.
Right. Yeah. Thankfully, my mom was fluent in English. Her second language would be Spanish as well. Same with me.
Mhm.
So I did have that opportunity to get homework help. But I do know that other people did not, just because they had parents whose primary language was Spanish. So and reading. So like, when having explanations, it would be difficult. Another barrier as well. I know as well that since Spanish is my second language, I struggle reverse. My struggle is reverse, which is like taking my English speaking and translating into Spanish and understanding that.
Could you
So
take LSAT in Spanish?
no, I took it in English.
Could you? Could you though? Could you?
Oh,
Could
could
you?
I? I can read.
I mean that
Of
in the sense of how
course,
much I feel for students that have to take the LSAT in their second language. That just seems
yeah.
impossible.
No, I definitely would probably not score where I was scoring, maybe, or as high or get even a decent. Like I can keep conversation with a person in Spanish, but as technical
That's
as
different than a reading comp passage.
yeah, no, the reading comps that throws at you, no, heck no. I could probably get the gist of it, but like when it comes to the details, the else I asked for, no way.
Like, what inferences did it make? And you're like, I'm still not sure.
Exactly.
So what do you wish you knew when you were starting off studying for the LSAT? So back in March, what do you wish you knew?
I wish I knew how long it was going to take. I feel like if I knew it was going to take long, I would have maybe started earlier, I know
Mhm.
people are like, oh, like only study the year before you plan on applying like your cycle. But I wish like I would have known maybe sooner that it was how broad of a range of months or years it could take somebody to get to the level that they're at. I always thought it was like, oh, 3 months should be fine. It should be sufficient to get a score you want. But I've been at it since April. That's more than 3 months.
That's another disadvantage I think that students that are first generation lawyers have is that I don't personally, like, I don't think I know an attorney. Like, I don't have any friends that are attorneys. I don't have any mentors that are attorneys.
Right.
I'm from a really small town and I don't even know who I would go to ask advice. Thankfully, I had a friend that happened to work at my company that was starting her journey and I kind of got to dabble through her. But even she said that she didn't know what she was doing. And after watching my journey, because she was kind of like the older sibling, that I watched what she did and then did it a little bit better in the sense of I learned from her like what she did well in her mistakes. Mm-hmm. And that just because she didn't have any friends that were attorneys. So like, what do you do when you don't know? And I think it falls into what you just said, that you don't realize how long it's going to take.
Right. Yeah. And like, thankfully I was able to meet a professor here in the program, but him too, he expressed like his difficulty with the LSAT and that he didn't score well. And he took like a cookie cutter course and that still didn't help him. So okay. So like, obviously I respect everything you do and you're successful, but like maybe he didn't know what he was doing, and it was so long ago. He's not old or anything, but like it's definitely.
I hope he watches this. It's like, Angelica's calling you a dinosaur.
No.
I'm gonna send this to him. I'm gonna find his email.
No, please do, so that he knows like how much help he has provided for me. I just hope he realizes that I'm able to express that to him. But yeah, but like he was like, it's such a different time, age gap, that times are different, the LSAT's different, so
mm-hmm.
That's another.
How often do you study? So you've been studying like how often? Yeah.
I want to say an average to 5 to 6 days. Well, I want to say 6 days. Yeah, usually I take Sundays off, but I average 5 to 6 days, at least 3 hours a day. At the beginning, it was maybe more like 5.
What were you studying? Yeah, tell me your summer schedule, because you did not do a summer job, correct? You studied full time.
Yeah, I was able to study full time, thankfully. So I would do, some days I would do like, I'll do one section, like I'll do logic games for like an hour and then I'll take a lunch break or something and then do LR for like 2 hours. And then I would like take a break and then go back to reading comp in the evening for 2 hours. So that's about 5 hours. Once I started getting more comfortable with certain parts of the exam, I really changed the way I distributed my time, where like LR was something I still struggled with and I would still do like 2 hours of LR and then like a few hours of reading comp and then just maybe like do a few games, because I was so comfortable with my games that I didn't feel like, yes, I still needed to practice, but not as intensely as before.
You just needed to keep your skills sharp.
Right, exactly. So like it varied. At the beginning, it was like 5 hours a day. I didn't know what I was doing because I was starting off with the Mike Kim textbook.
LSAT trainer?
Yeah, yes, the LSAT trainer. And so I was just doing things out of that. And then once summer came around, I continued with that. I purchased the red LSAT, like PT 70s text or book. I don't remember the exact name, but it's one of their books. And I did that during the summer as well, like taking little sections and doing that. And it was finally till August where I got a concrete schedule of doing like an LR section every other day, drilling like 10 questions of a specific LR, doing at least 1 passage to 2 passages of reading comp a day, and changing how I do reading comp in a sense of like, your drill where you read it, you try to get as best as you can and try to compare it to LSAT Hacks or any type of other online resource that gave their explanation of the exam or of the passage. Sorry. So yeah, it was different.
What have been your favorite resources to use while studying?
I think Brad was a good resource. You were a good resource, as well as I was able to try out LSAT Demon for a few weeks, which was really good. I like that. I also thought one of the, I can't remember, Fox. I don't remember his first name.
Nathan Fox?
Yeah, Nathan Fox. He cracked me up with his explanations because he would swear in them, and I
It's no swearing.
yeah, and he would just
Valid.
yeah, he would just read it. He'd be like, what? That doesn't make sense. Like right away, he would read the stimulus or whatever and be like, okay, this, like, he would just like poke holes everywhere in that argument. So I took that from him, and I was able to be like, okay, why are you wrong? Like read it.
Lies, all lies.
Yeah, literally. So I was just like, whatever you tell me, I'll believe your statements. I'll believe your facts you throw at me, but I will not believe how you got to your argument.
I love that. Yeah. Well, so what are
Yes.
some other things that if you were starting out studying now, you would say really focus on these skills or really spend a lot of time in establishing this?
Definitely don't underestimate reading comp. I think that's one thing I did. I'm a very strong reader when it comes to like my testing, but the LSAT reading is definitely a different animal. So don't underestimate it, as well as take one section of the exam at a time. I kind of did all three at once, which I wished I would have done one section at a time while just like doing practice drills of a previous exam or a previous section as I went along, because I felt like I was trying to do so much
At once.
at once that it really, I think, was kind of a setback in myself, and I wasn't able to properly dedicate the attention and time focus to the exam, the part of the exam.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing I wish I would have known, as well as timing. Being able to give yourself small rewards was another one. Just celebrating like, oh, I went up a point in the section, or oh, like I got 9 out of 10 right in my drills, like things like, or like, hey, I nailed this in my understanding and translation. I may have not done hot on the questions, but at least I did well on the passage understanding
it, because you can't always look at everything as a whole picture, because if you do that, then you might never get to the end. You have to find like small things to judge your progress. Yeah. What about main conclusions? How has your attitude towards main conclusions changed on LR?
Oh yes, main conclusion. So I started off with just trying to learn the basic strategies per question, per different type of LR question. But then coming to you, the one thing that I hear in my sleep is through the eyes of the conclusion. So every time I read, and I started looking at stimulus in LR with, the idea of identifying the main conclusion, and how does the argument add up to this conclusion, and how can I destroy the conclusion in a sense.
Kill the conclusion.
Exactly. And I would apply the answer choices. How does it affect the main conclusion? And I thought that's where I saw an increase in my LR section. So I feel like that's really another thing I wish I would have known earlier, is like, yes, learn how to tackle the questions, but while you tackle the questions, learn the strategy, learn how it applies to the main conclusion, because that's something you're going to see in majority of the LR stimulus.
Yeah, 90% are arguments, maybe 10%, like your must be truths and most strongly supported are just statements. Mm-hmm. So do you think that you've taken the LSAT for the final time?
I really hope so. I feel like I did well on this exam. I don't know though, because sometimes people are like, oh, I did so good, and then you get your results back and it's like, oh, about that. I mean, definitely LR was I want to say like average, or maybe a little bit less than average as to what I was used to. I felt like some of the questions are more easier. The games I felt 100% confident in, and I think the reading comp was probably the most challenging part of the test, just because there were like harder reading comp passages in it. Like,
no, that's fair. You thought it was a harder reading comp section compared to normal.
Yeah. So yeah, overall, I hope it's my last time, but there's also the perspective of, hey, if you take it again, can you get higher? And if you get a higher score, can you get more money?
Yeah, you're all about those scholarships.
Yeah, because like I don't come from a wealthy background, like I don't come from any of that. I can't afford, I also don't want to be in debt after, because that's another option. You know, people are like, oh, if you can't afford it, why don't you just take out loans? Well, you got to pay back those loans someday, right?
At an interest rate.
Yeah. So no, thank you. Like I want to, like if I know I can get a decent score and a good scholarship, I'd rather go that.
I love that. I think that's really smart. And then so like, where are you looking at going to school?
So definitely I'm looking at WashU, Washington University in St. Louis, because it's not that far from where I go to school now.
And they're a top 20 program. They're excellent.
Yes, they are. As well as I love the campus because like I hang out around the campus when I go to do there's like a lot of shops around there, so I'll go hang out around there. I'm also looking at a couple universities back at home in Chicago, Northwestern and University of Chicago, as well as Notre Dame. So yeah, those are like my yeah, like my top. And then I'm looking at other ones too, like where like it's more of a comfortable route. I want to like a comfortable, I have like a decent, like I know, not that I know I'll get accepted, but like I have,
we call those safety schools, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I'm looking at a couple of those too, but my goal is to get in to the top, those top four.
Which with your GPA and your experience, it sounds like you have a really good shot.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you.
So do you have any last words of advice before we stop our video? Or stop our big show?
I would say don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask people. There's Facebook group pages that you can join. That's where I learned a lot from. Don't be afraid to dabble with different tutors if you come to the conclusion that you need one. I did. I was with Brad during the summer, and he taught me the basics of the exam as well as really helped me get to where I'm at with logic games. I think he did a well job, but then I also came to you for LR and reading comp as well, because I felt like you had a different perspective, and I was able to combine both of yours and Brad's strategies to really help me understand the exam. So I was really grateful for that. So that's one thing. Is definitely, if you get a tutor, don't be afraid to stick with just one tutor. Definitely, get the help that you need and don't feel bad about it. And just put in the time.
Put in the time.
Because I know it sucks having to think of, I don't want to study for 5 hours today, or not even 5, but for 3 hours, but just like the relief you're going to get once you're done, and, seeing where you can get with all that hard work. Like, hey, you might get a full ride here at this school. Like, heck yeah, I'm going to put in 5 hours.
It can change your life.
Yeah, like, heck yeah, I'm going to put in 5 hours a day so I can get a full ride to law school.
I remember whenever I was studying, the biggest thing that changed my attitude was, instead of viewing the LSAT as something that held me back, I viewed it as something that could open doors that couldn't be opened without my LSAT score.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely look at it as like an opportunity more than a setback. I like that. I like that perspective a lot. I agree with it. Yes, it's a monster, it's a beast, but you can learn it if you put in the time. Like, I remember like when I did logic games, I was crying when I first started doing them. Like, literally asking my mom, or like my boyfriend, I would be bawling. My sister, I would be bawling. Please somebody help. And after like, a few months of putting it in and getting like perfect sections, I was like, wow, it's definitely like, it's worth the time. Put in the work, it'll pay off. I know it's cliche and a lot of people say it, but like,
it's true.
It is, yeah. There's a reason why it's repeated.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.